Well, hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Ivana, and on behalf of Global School Leader, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this panel on leadership in early childhood education. Research has consistently shown us that a right beginning changes lives. When interactions are intentional, conscious, and caring, they become the right foundation for children's lifelong development. The sustaining those interactions and the quality they enable depends on quality. At GSL, we believe leadership can be transformative in ECD. As we begin the conversation today, I invite us all to reflect. What does it mean to lead ECD in the Global South? What successful leadership models in ECD from Africa, from Asia, and Latin America can we learn from, and how can these lessons be adapted elsewhere? These are some of the questions our distinguished panelists will help us to explore today. We have today Mercedes Machol Lassalle. She is the World President of the World Organization for the Early Childhood Education, the OMEP, and is board of the Global Campaign for Education, member of the coordination group of the UNESCO Collective Consultation of NGOs in Education 2030, and member of the UNESCO Technical Advisory Group for the follow-up of the Tashkent Declaration. And she's also professor in the University of Buenos Aires. We also have Mimu Nanwani. She's program director at Ishk Tolaram in Indonesia, leading large-scale ECD initiatives with more than 2 decades of experiences. She drives systemic change through play-based learning, teacher mentoring, and leadership development to build equitable early learning ecosystems. We also have Angy Mateus Segura from aeioTU. She's economist and early childhood leader with nearly 20 years of experience in public policy, research, and large-scale program implementation in Colombia. She has led systemic transformation processes in early childhood from aeioTU that promotes quality early learning in territories historically affected by conflict in the country. We also have Divya Lata, the Global Thematic Lead on Early Childhood Education from UNICEF. She has wide experience on promoting child-focused policies and programs in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern and Southern Europe. Divya is deeply interested in disability rights and social justice. Currently, she co-leads the ECED working group at the INEE. She has served on the boards of the Asia Pacific Regional Network for Early Childhood, ARNEC, at Singapore, the Civil Society Education Fund for Asia, and the Child Trust in London. And finally, I will introduce you to our moderator, Sheldon Shaeffer. He is now the chair board of directors of the Asia Pacific Regional Network on Early Childhood, ARNEC. He is member of the Executive Leadership Council on Early Childhood Development Action Network, and formerly he was the director of the UNESCO's Asia and Pacific Regional Bureau for Education in Bangkok and head of UNICEF's Global Education Program in New York. So after this introduction of all our distinguished people today, I share the space with my colleague Sheldon. Please go ahead, Sheldon.
Thank you very much, Ivana. I must say how happy and honored I am to be part of this panel, especially with such distinguished panelists. Some of I've known for decades and others only by reputation, but I'm very happy to be here. What we want to do at the beginning, what we call sort of the first round, is to sort of set the stage. And the question has to do with the issue of panelists offering reflections on what does good school leadership look like in the ECD context. We had the different panelists commenting on different issues that they thought were important. And there were certainly words that kept repeating themselves. I think part of an answer to this issue: ethical, collaborative, equitable, caring, joyful, transformative, trusting, meaningful relationships. This is part of the question, part of the answer as to what good quality early childhood education development leadership looks like. But we have a chance now for each of the panelists to spend about 3 minutes giving their reflection on that before we move to the next part of it. So I'll start with Mercedes, please.
Hello, well, good morning, good evening. Thank you very much, Sheldon, for your introduction, and also Ivana, and to all the colleagues that are joining from all around the world. I am deeply grateful with UNESCO, the GEM report team, and the global school leaders for organizing this timely and inspiring summit. Well, Sheldon, what does good leadership looks like in the early years in early education? For OMEP, leadership in early education is not about authority or hierarchy. It's about ethical and human responsibility. And good leaders create environments of equity, of care, of joy, where every child is recognized that as a right holder, as a citizen from birth. And they lead with empathy, with pedagogical wisdom, and with the conviction that the early years are not only preparation for life, they are life or today. So good leadership is also a collective. It is about to build with teachers, with families, with communities, to listen, to have, like Gianni Rodari said, a green ear. It connects and it trusts. As we say in OMEP, leadership must move from the administration idea or paradigm to accompaniment, from control to collaboration. And across the global south, I have seen extraordinary examples. Community-based directors and educators who, with very few resources, transform daily routines into spaces of learning, of play, of dignity. And their strength lies not in the management manuals, but in the commitment, in the creativity, in solidarity, in respect. Finally, good leadership is, of course, transformative. It defends public, free, and high quality early childhood education as a right and as a public good. So, this is some words for the opening.
Thank you very much. I'm going to follow up with Mimu and then Angy and Divya, just to warn you. So, Mimu, please.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm Mimu Nanwani. I'm the program director of Ishk Tolaram, Yayasan in Indonesia, and I lead the educational programs. So, when we speak of leadership in early childhood, so we are not just talking about management, as earlier shared, we're actually talking about mindset. The mindset that every child deserves to be seen, and that change begins with how we see them. In our work across Indonesia, I've seen that the earliest years of education are where the system either becomes compassionate or remains transactional, almost like an assembly line. So if leadership begins anywhere, it begins where values are first lived out, in the preschool, in the teacher's tone of voice, in the trust built with parents. Strong leaders are, the invisible infrastructure of quality. They hold together the teachers, the parents, and systems that otherwise work in silos. So in Indonesia, it's interesting because they are not just sitting behind desks. Sometimes they are also multitaskers. They're teaching, managing feeding programs, negotiating with local education office, and sometimes even comforting a crying child. And all of this before 10 a.m. So, I know wherever we are in the world, 6, 7 a.m. seems early, but they are doing everything before 10 a.m. So when we invest in their capacity, we invest in the ecosystem of care that the children grow up in. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I like the attention to the word ecosystem as opposed to just with educated development system, because I think this broader definition of is important. Next to Angy, please.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Such a great honor to be here. And I think good leadership in early childhood education is relational, ethical, and systemic. It's not about authority or management, but about create ecosystems of trust where learning, care, and community come together. In aeioTU, we see strong leaders as those who connect three words: policy, pedagogy, and people. They translate public priorities into daily practices, nurture teachers' professional growth, and engage families as co educators. Good leadership is therefore not individual, it's collective. It's what turns early childhood centers into living communities of learning where children, teachers, and families thrive together. It's what we thought for the first
Wonderful.
words.
Fine. Thank you very much. And finally, last but not least, my my former colleague from Bangkok, Divya, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheldon. Greetings, colleagues, from a very early morning in New York, and lovely to be part of this panel. Thanks also to my co-panelists. You have laid out such an inspiring set of key parameters. But let me just drill down a little bit deeper into the granularity of what this broader ecosystem looks like for early childhood development, and indeed our agenda in the education part of early learning. Leadership, as colleagues have said, is in early childhood is multi-level, and it is embedded in multi-stakeholder socio-ecological systems, or as I think Mimu called it, the ecosystem of how early childhood centers are positioned and the children are supported. Looking specifically from the education side, early childhood education must be recognized as an integral part of education, and their leadership of ministries to leverage the education strategic planning mechanisms to then give it its rightful place and support is very critical to leadership. Of course, we know that the play-based pedagogy that characterizes early learning processes must be reflected in curricula, in the workforce, quality assurance systems, and that again leads to the focus on not only ministries, but then at every level, how these approaches are rolled out. And of course, one of the strong elements of early childhood support is the cross-sectoral coordination that we seek to bring to be able to holistically support the child and the families and parents. And the most recent Lancet series re-emphasized the value of early childhood centers in not only pursuing the learning agenda, but indeed becoming hubs through which, as Angy said, it becomes a community of a living community of practitioners and other supporters who are really working with the family to provide that best start to life, which is the right of every child. Finally, I think it's getting these different levels to really harness and nurture the capabilities, by which I mean the motivations, the understanding and skills of teachers, as well as the parents, families, and communities who ultimately shape the environment and the experiences in which the child grows. And that is what ultimately moves the needle for what the outcomes will be. And here, very briefly, I count school leaders, from the families and communities themselves, and of course the community-based, faith-based organizations and cultural leaders, in addition to the local authorities and the ministry-level governance systems. So in summary, yes, it is that ecosystem that at every level has leadership that can really make that difference to every child and lead us to being very productive and inclusive societies. Let me stop there for now.
Wonderful. I mean, all of these reasons, all of these analyses make it very frustrating, I think, for people, especially like Mercedes and me, who've been in the game for I won't say how many decades, Mercedes, making the argument for early childhood, because it seems so clear to us the importance and what makes good early childhood development programs and leadership. But it's still so hard often to convince others who have the money or the wherewithal to agree with us. So let's move ahead. I'm going to turn it over now just to technical staff here to raise a couple of questions, a kind of audience poll that will have the audience vote on a couple of questions, and then we'll move on after that. So the first question then, in your context, which of these describes how leadership in most early childhood development education programs is provided? So in your context, through the formal education system or more through community-based or other informal initiatives, just choose one of those to vote. I'm told this works, technically speaking. So, all right. So through the formal education system, through community-based or other informal initiatives. So almost twice as much through the formal education system, which I would not have expected actually. But in fact, that can be good or it can be bad, depending on how informed the formal education system is about the importance of early childhood. Thank you. The second question then, please. What do you see as the biggest challenge to strengthening ECED leadership? And here, a single choice, I'm sure it'll be difficult to choose one: lack of adequate professional development opportunities, for example, lack of adequate middle tier support above local level, district level, poor working conditions, low status and remuneration, and unclear expectations and responsibilities of the ECED leadership. So please, for a second, just vote on that. One choice. All right, thank you. We have another part, which is sort of the deep dive discussion, which would be more of a conversation around guiding questions that are underlying this the session. One has to do with distributed roles. Who are the key actors? And we've heard that already from some of the panelists. Leading ECED ecosystems, from school heads to community-based leaders, including parents, I think, and how can their role better complement one another? Equity and inclusion. In what ways can ECED leadership help close equity gaps and ensure inclusive, linguistically cultural relevant? Here we're talking about inclusion broadly defined beyond disability to look at gender and location, geographic location, poverty, etc. And this relates to one thing that one of the commentators, one of the panelists talked about, the importance of inclusion in ECED to help close the gap when children go into the primary school. The gaps that they have been identified and to some extent ameliorated. Capacity and support. What kinds of training, mentoring, and system level support are most effective in building capable ECD leaders? And some of you have already talked about just the idea in terms of challenges. Leadership models are transferred from primary, secondary education. They don't respect cultural identities. You end up having a main challenge of the dominance of administrative management over pedagogical and ethical leadership. This whole question of a gap in understanding the science of early childhood development. So these are the challenges that capacity building and support have to be developed so much. And finally, learning across contexts. In your responses, if you can talk about any successful ECED leadership models from Africa, Asia, and Latin America can we learn from, especially in the context of the other guiding questions that we've named. So here it's sort of open-ended. If we look first at this issue of distributed roles, the key actors, you don't have to comment on every question, all of you, but are there any particular issues that you'd like to raise just in a few minutes? Key actors, how can their roles better complement one another?
Yes,
Just volunteer.
can I take the floor?
Mercedes, please.
Yes.
And
I would like to start with the data, a key data point of the Global Education Monitor report, the last one on 2024-2025. And they say that fewer than 1/3 of countries provide systematic induction of mentoring for school leaders. And this is a statistic that exposes a silent crisis in leadership preparation offered by the state. And as we know, in early childhood education, this gap is totally wider than primary school or secondary school. So many directors, coordinators, or community educators step into leadership roles without a specific training in pedagogy and in management, because you can be a very good teacher, but a horrible director or principal in the settings in the organization. So they lead with the hearts and with the experience, but not often without the support system that could sustain the professional growth. And also the dignity of the condition of your work, of course. And so at OMEP, we see leadership not only as a position, as a process of shared responsibility, and also and the main responsibility comes from the state. So through our initiative, for example, we begin to demonstrate in different projects connected with education for sustainability or play and resilience, that we demonstrate how distributed and community-based leadership can sustain quality, inclusion, and lifelong learning, and the experience of these leaders. And in Latin America, I can add something. We have been working a lot with community-based ECE settings in several countries, and mainly, for example, in Argentina, we have developed a program with community-based settings, ECE settings, and the training for the leaders were totally important, and it has a direct impact in quality, in equity, and in inclusion in these communities.
Okay. Thank you, Mercedes. I think, Angie, you had a comment, and then we'll have to move on to another question. You'll all get a chance to say something about something. So, Angie, were you going to say something?
I'm totally agree with Mercedes, and I think leadership is in early childhood education is distributed. It's not a responsibility of one person, but of an entire ecosystem. Teachers, pedagogical mentors, coordinators, families, and community caregivers all shape children's daily experiences. In Colombia, aeioTU works with municipalities and our institution for welfare, that is ICBF, and we work to connect these roles into coherent leadership networks. When directors, teachers, and family educators share a common vision of early learning, collaboration replaces supervision. Each actor contributes from their own strengths. Mentors guide reflection and contributes from their own strengths. Families co-create experience, and local authorities help to sustain all the system. This collective model transforms isolated efforts into a leadership ecosystem capable of improving quality and inclusion over the time. To achieve these, programs and projects must address each actor in the ecosystem and speak their language, helping everyone understand their role and contribution to a shared purpose, where all key players in children's, where uh, all of the key players in children comprehensive development. It's like put all different stakeholders to dance at the same rhythm. So totally agree with Mercedes, and I think we need that kind of leadership that not just set orders to everyone, but inspire everyone to put the best for the children development.
Thank you very much. I like the idea of dancing to the same rhythm. No,
Very
samba,
lovely.
something like that. Yes, that was good. The second question, and I think perhaps Divya, I know, wants to say something, and perhaps Mimu also. I know Indonesia has many challenges relating to equity and inclusion. So how can good ECDE leadership help close these equity gaps and ensure inclusive early childhood development, broadly defined? Divya, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Sheldon. And yes, early years have been long recognized as equity drivers. But we also know that children from the poorest quintiles are 3 times less likely to access pre-primary education globally. And of course, there are other barriers as well around linguistic lines and also, children with disabilities who often don't have access, 25% less likely than their peers to be able to attend pre-primary education. Leadership that prioritizes early childhood education actually shifts the odds for the child, for their families, and for society. And just to take the example of Brazil, where when municipalities expanded childcare, they saw a 9% rise in maternal employment. So you can see how evidence is showing us that it does lead to equity and indeed benefit society as a whole, unlocking women's economic participation through effective ECE system leadership. I want to focus a little bit more specifically on disability inclusion. And as I said, children with disabilities are 25% less likely to attend a pre-primary program. And I want to draw upon the experience of Ethiopia to illustrate some of the ways that leadership in early childhood can really advance this agenda. In Ethiopia, the Early Childhood Development Education Policy Framework, which was launched in 2023 with the UNICEF's support, it prioritizes disability inclusion with timely identification, integrated interventions through mainstream pre-primary schools. The important thing was that evidence-based planning for children with disabilities has been integrated into the education sector plan, right from pre-primary all the way up to secondary education. And within that, there is provision to make all pre-primary teaching and learning materials, environments, both gender transformative and disability inclusive. You can see the intersectionality there as well. Informed by robust data, which was one of the key anchors of their strategy moving forward, the Education Management Information System, which is based on child functionality, disaggregates data on children with disabilities, including enrollment, the barriers they face, and the number of teachers trained, etc., which then helps to make robust decisions based on hard data. Finally, we do see the impact of that. So between 2020 to 2023, about 63,000 children with disabilities were reached through pre-primary programs as part of the National Education Sector Plan, which was for the period 2020 to 2025. And now we are working with the government to do a more deeper subsector analysis to strengthen disability inclusion in ECE, especially also looking at the intersectionality of the internally displaced person that, as you know, in certain parts of like Tigray, etc., there are parts of the country where there has been long-standing conflict, and of course the other underserved groups. So in summary, having this kind of strong steer from the ministries and then which can guide other levels of leadership to play their role can really go a long way in unpacking and making this approach really feasible, viable, and bring real benefits to all children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimu. I'd like to ask you, I know Indonesia has one of the most complicated linguistic, social, cultural, economic contexts and contexts in terms of the ECED ecosystem. So in terms of inclusion and equity issues beyond disability, because there is the broader definition, what would you reflect on? What can best be done and how can ECED help to do that?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I couldn't agree more with all the panelists, that have spoken before me, and utmost admiration for all the work that you all do. But I think for us, the school leadership piece has just come into play because we've just partnered with the global school leaders in forming a concrete leadership training program. And from that, we've learned a lot. So the biggest gap isn't resources, it's basically recognition. ECED leaders are often left out of leadership pipelines because they don't fit into that school principal mold, because so they're not into the formal education because they're in the ECED sectors, which falls a lot in the informal section. So what we have learned is that we need to reframe leadership from position to purpose. So in many of the communities that we have served, the strongest leaders are the volunteers running an ECED center right out of their front porch. So when systems are fragmented, our job isn't actually, I've realized, to fix everything, but it's basically to connect hearts, right? So building local capacity and letting that leadership grow from within. So I'd like to share, in one of the regencies that we recently did a training, a head teacher told me after the training, and we included the section on mentoring for them, as well as like the similar approach that we have for the preschool teachers. Her quote is, "For the first time, I saw myself not as an administrator, because they've always seen themselves as an administrator, but as a learner." So that shift that came from control to curiosity is what leadership development should aim for, even if it's in small silos. But I think ultimately that ripple effect would actually stay longer with the leaders. So leadership is not about creating conditions for others to thrive only. It's also what conditions do our leaders need to thrive. So if we are thinking from that ecosystem perspective and building our programs based on that, I think we'll have a lot more traction on this piece as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. That's very, very informative, as I said, about a very complicated system. Just one more guiding question that we should spend about 5 minutes on. I think before we move on, this question of capacity and support, and some of you have talked about that just now. What kinds of training, mentoring, system level support are most effective in building capable ECD leaders? Mimu's just talked about that in the Indonesian context. Any of the other speakers, just a short response to that?
Can I come in, Sheldon?
Livia, and then Angie, please.
Yeah, thank you. I actually wanted to dwell a little bit on capacity building of parents, families, communities to contribute. And I think earlier on, some of us referred to the need to really look at how holistic support can be provided to children, which is not only on the learning and education side, but indeed draws in support from the other sectoral services. And again, I want to draw upon the example from one of the countries, and Uganda, which is which in 2016 had launched its National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy, and that implicated about 7 different ministries to play their role to contribute. One of the key aspects of really getting this policy off the ground and embedded within the actual fabric of society was how to work with parents and communities. I'll be very brief, I know this time. So one of the things that we picked up was the key family care practices, which were originally part of just the nutrition program, training parents on doing, the IYCF, the young child's feeding programs, and how they can care for the child who is sick. So these were expanded to embrace other elements, including developmental support, and taking it right from early childhood across the continuum into adolescence. It gave a common framework to be rolled out through multiple service points of different sectoral services. And at the same time, it maintained the sectoral expertise, the protocol, the data systems, so that, for example, if a pre-primary center was convening parents in a particular session to talk about pregnancy and antenatal care, they actually invited the primary health person to come and talk about it, so that the information is accurate, and also parents know who to look out for when they are seeking these services. And my final point on this, the final point is that it also leveraged the support of cultural leaders, faith-based organizations who not only provide a lot of these services, but indeed are very important in shaping the understanding. And in fact, we had guidance through these leaders through the weekly sermons that were done, and which drew upon the learning around early childhood so that they could do a good job of that. So I thought those were quite strong examples.
Thank you. Okay, Angie, do you have something briefly to say? I would like Mercedes to have a chance to talk about equity and inclusion also, because it's one of the major underpinnings of OMEP. But Angie, 1 minute comment?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Gomerson, sorry.
No, Angie.
Go ahead,
Well,
Andy.
I would like to address to that the capacity development for early childhood leaders must be continuous, localized, and reflective. One-time workshops are not enough. And I would like to talk about two experiences that we had, and in collaboration with GLCell, with global school leaders. In 2024, through the Rio Juego y Aprende program, Loud, Play and Learn project, project in Caquetá, Colombia, a rural area very affected by conflict. I had to combine project that develop a program on comprehensive child development from Universidad de los Andes, the Faculty of Education of Los Andes University, with leadership workshops built on 3 of 6 high-level actions from global school leaders. The results were remarkable, and we found that principals and coordinators began to rethink their role from supervisors to mentors, fostering collaborative teams that inspire other teachers and families across the communities. Sustaining mentoring, peer networks, and local government alignment proved essential to turn leadership into a lever for quality and lasting change. And briefly, I want to say that building up this experience and in partnership with global school leaders, aeioTU Network adapted the GeoCell module into a free 30 hours online course titled Cultivating a Culture of High Expectation from Early Childhood. This course was launched in March of this year, and at this time we have nearly 2,300 people enrolled. 34 are practicing school leaders, and 47% are teachers seeking to strengthen their leadership skills because they understand that leadership skills are needed to transform the community.
Okay,
Sorry
thank
if
you.
I extend.
No, very much. And I would like Mercedes to just talk a little, a
Yes,
couple of minutes, because both capacity and inclusion are so essential to OMEP, please.
Okay. Yes. Well, we know that early childhood education and care is fragmented, is unequal, is diverse, and usually the training for leaders is only focused on one model, and because it is diverse, we need many different models of training our leaders. So leadership can flourish only when public policies provide training, mentoring, and can address and can allow leaders to address equity and inclusive services and to work with the barriers that do not allow children to access early childhood education. So, in this sense, I am thinking, for example, in Chile. Chile has a huge organization called the JUNJI, the Junta Nacional de Jardines de Infantes, and they put together all the programs and the formats and the diversity of early childhood education and care settings and programs inside that. So they can build a culturally responsive training models and and offer to the communities and to the children where they are, in the mountains, in the islands, in the cities, in the country. So this is something that it is so important to the integrated approaches that Divya has stressed so well, multi-level, multi-actoral, cross-sectorial models, but also the idea that we need to be culturally responsive, and of course the training of the leaders should respect the local knowledge, this cosmovision, and the opening to the communities. So open the dialogue with communities, and when this leadership becomes in that way shared, supported in a context sensitive way, and they benefit reach every child and every educator and every community. And that is why we need public policy that can be sensitive with this idea and can give also training, mentoring, but also time for reflection, not only for the leaders, but also for all the community and all the personnel that are working in the different programs or settings.
Thank you so much. Just a comment for Ivana. Perhaps there'll be some mechanism at the end or in some other way to collect the links to a lot of the good practices that have been mentioned here and make them available to the people who are participating, because there are so many good examples that we've talked about. We did want to have time for a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, and there are a couple of them, but I'd like to choose one which is quite unusual in a way that I've never thought of it, and I think it is more relevant than it ever has been. And the question relates to trauma-informed teaching should be compulsory, especially in recent chaotic incidents and crises all around the world. Why is no one looking and engaging in more research and implementation on trauma-informed teaching, which is probably even more important for young children who suffer in many ways the most from various kinds of trauma? Anyone? That's a question out of the blue, as we say. Anyone have any insights for a minute or two? Otherwise, we'll go into another question too.
I'm happy to take a stab, Sheldon, very briefly.
Yes.
So thank you. That's such an important question. And, quite often, even at the foundational learning level beyond early childhood, it's the cognitive numeracy literacy which catches more attention and relatively less on social emotional learning, let alone situations when children are actually facing trauma. So just a couple of things. One of the ways actually this has been addressed, in fact, in humanitarian settings is by setting up these child-friendly spaces. And we know that when we do provide children with these safe, stimulating environments in which they can spend their time, play, learn, and engage with each other and the adults around them in a supportive environment, it does lead to better overcoming the trauma. And in fact, that regularity of engaging activities, while also providing that support to the parents who probably at that time are engaged in getting their lives together. So that works in both ways in terms of providing the support to the children as well as providing that support to parents. There are approaches around caring for the caregiver which are going more deeply into really engaging with parents and also teachers as caregivers who are typically often themselves involved in such situations. And then the final point is really at the same time, I fully endorse the need to be a little bit more intentional and mindful as we look at some of the approaches through which children can be supported. And I'm sure Mimu has something to say about that as well.
Yes, go on. Mimu, did you want to say something?
No. So I just wanted to add, resilience is leadership's second name, right? So we've seen leaders thrive without perfect systems and, building the safe spaces, as mentioned earlier. It's just that they work based on trust, relationships, and the community's wisdom itself. So, just based on that, building that safe space where even parents understand, school leaders and teachers and the communities understand that this is where a child thrives is actually very, very essential.
I mean, there is the issue that I think the question raises about the, if you will, increasing number of crises. One talks sometimes about a polycrisis, which goes back to impact of COVID, but is climate, is conflict, is war, is increasing marginalization, poverty. All of these, again, as I say, affecting young children probably more than anyone else. And therefore, building that into social emotional learning and other things into ECED programs and making sure teachers, in terms of their mental health, but also are able to deal with the social emotional questions that one finds coming out of these crises, I think is so important. Just to say, each of you is going to get a minute at the end in a little while on final thoughts. There was one other question I think we have maybe time for one response to. Does good leadership vary at different levels of education? Are there certain central features of good leadership that cut across all levels and regions in the education system? Someone give a quick question to that very quick answer to that very broad question. Anything central to good leadership in all levels of education? I think you've already mentioned a lot, but
Yes.
can anyone?
Well, something central is to abandon the dominance of administrative management over pedagogical and ethical leadership. I think that this is the main problem. We, across all the countries, we spend most of the time filling reports, complying with standards, managing logistics and things like that. And this overemphasis in bureaucracy leaves very little space for mentoring, for creativity, for communication, for innovation. And this is why we need to abandon the management perspective borrowed for the corporate world. I have been managing or leading many organizations, and I think that we have been training in not in connecting with human process, no, and recognizing that this education is a complex and distinct human process that cannot be addressed through managerial or corporate experience. Education is not a commodity, but a social, ethical, and cultural right that belongs, that every child and every community has the right to education. So, from a pedagogical perspective, leadership means created conditions for exploration, for play, for meaningful learning. And from ethical perspective, it means acted with compassion, with integrity, protecting human dignity. And this is why it is important to build on participation in dialogue and in collective responsibility.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to add something here to take it upon myself, something that hasn't really been mentioned in terms of, I think, central to all levels of leadership is, as someone has mentioned, the lack of communication with and understanding of parents and families in the local community and what they bring or don't bring necessarily to child rearing. But linked to that also is the issue of very often school leaders have no understanding of this educational context or development context from which children have come or into which they are going at different levels of education. I've been in schools all around the world, if you will, where you have a preschool in the same compound as a primary school, and they never talk to each other. There's no concept of transition. There's no concept of learning from what's happened in the past. So to me, one example of good leadership is also looking at the broader picture, both out to the community and to parents, but also up and down the system. And what can they do to ease the transition that children face, especially in chaotic crisis contexts? And I think that's important. I think we have to move on. We're almost at the end, but I want to get to this final point, and this is where you have a last chance of pontification, if you will, about your important point of view. Each one offers one key takeaway or action idea for about a minute. Shall we start again with Mercedes in the same order we had before?
Well, thank you, Sheldon. And well, I think that my message I want to say is leadership in early childhood education is leadership for future, for present, for humanity. It means protecting the power of play, of culture, of mother tongue, of nurturing, of curiosity and care, building peace in from the very beginning of life. And at OMEP, we believe that transformative leadership begins with ethical and political commitment, and also, of course, pedagogical knowledge. And for many, many years, we have worked strengthening early childhood systems, supporting educators, promoting inclusion and justice. But the world is very difficult. As you have said, Sheldon, we need to be very aware of what is happening in the world and in the field. And we gather today. We are gathering voices from the global south, and we must recognize that leadership cannot be detached from the history of colonialism. And we need to decolonize our pedagogies and our perspectives. And this it means that true leadership means valuing knowledge, languages, practice, cultures that emerge from our own territories, the wisdom of the families, the women, teachers and communities who educates with love, with creativity, often under the most difficult condition, as our colleague from Colombia showed. We are in a very, very difficult condition in the global south also, and connected with poverty, connected with violence, with the gangs, with all the things that are crossing our fields in huge inequalities. So the future of education in the early years depends in our ability to listen to these voices, to build new paradigms of learning from the South to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll go to Mimu, Angy, and Divya. One key action point, one key idea. So, Mimu?
Thank you so much. I think Mercedes has covered a lot of it for us, so I don't have that much to say. But thank you, Mercedes. I love what you just said. So I think leadership in ECED is not about titles. It's about tending to the small things that shape the big futures, because that's where, children are first interacted, where they are separated from their houses. So if they feel safe enough, a lot of the trauma, a lot of the shedding, a lot of the work has already begun there itself. So I would say that if we can grow leaders who lead with love and purpose in these early years, we just won't transform schools, we'll actually transform society as a whole as well, right? So, I think what I have learned and, heard from everyone today is that the Global South can actually teach the world that excellence and equity are not opposites. They can live together if love leads. Thank you very much.
Okay. I like the idea of growing leaders. That's better than training them or educating them. A lot of good terms coming out of this conversation that I think should be saved for the future, like dancing to the same rhythm. Anyway, Angy, please.
Thank you very much. And I want to close with this idea is that early childhood marks the beginning of children's educational journey and shapes how they relate with knowledge, with learning, with exploration through their lives. So this requires close collaboration with families, and that's the start of all. Then the leadership demands these demands from the leaders that they are aware of this responsibility, but intentionally foster the synergies needed for a successful educational trajectory. Successful leadership shares a common principle. It's context responsive and collaborative. In our experience, when leadership is grounded in community participation, continuous reflection, and professional support, quality improves systematically. Um, the lessons resonate globally. Leadership should not be transplanted from one to another country. I think the leadership is a daily practice of care, trust, and purpose. That's all I have to say, and thank you very much for this.
Well, thank you. And Divya, the last word to the almost 150 people who are listening in.
Yes, thank you. And in 30 seconds, for me, The main point is that early childhood education is an integral part of education, not a nice to have, not a when we will address the other gaps, we will come to it. Indeed, all gaps that are being addressed, nothing can be more foundational to addressing them than early childhood education. And this must be reflected in everything that we do from in the development sphere, but also in the humanitarian settings. And of course, UNICEF remains committed to enabling school leaders like the ones you visited, Sheldon, to really embrace early childhood as an integral part of the school and provide all the support that it needs to indeed be a strong avenue for supporting children, families, and societies.
Thank you so much. This is all very inspiring, both from, if you will, the somewhat more advanced, experienced generation of Mercedes to the younger ones of the other panelists. I continue to be inspired by it, despite what we've all been through in the battle. So thank you very much to all the panelists. Now we have a couple of words from Ivana to close. So thank you again. Ivana, please.
Thank you, Sheldon. Thank you to our panelists for such an insightful conversation. And thank you to our audience as well for being so wonderful, engaged. It's been a privilege for me to be hosting this session. Please note that the SLM Summit is a 3-day event. So our next session is a deep dive now into the role of school leaders in advancing foundational literacy and numeracy outcomes, which is a trending topic as well. So please see the chat for more details to register and join us. Thank you and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you. Thank you
All right.
very much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.